What if I told you that the very air you are breathing right now is organized chaos, a symphony of sub-vocalized potential, and that understanding just a few strange, beautiful secrets about language could actually lower your heart rate? Forget meditation apps. We're diving deep into the linguistic bedrock of existence. Welcome. This isn't your typical dry linguistics lesson. This is the secret, soothing balm of communication. We have precisely 100 moments of pure, relaxing linguistic enlightenment coming your way. Facts so surprisingly gentle, they might just rewire your anxiety pathways. Get comfortable. We begin immediately, without preamble, because the most relaxing thing you can do right now is listen. Fact 1. Did you know that the word set holds the record for the most definitions in the Oxford English Dictionary? Over 430 distinct meanings. Think about that incredible flexibility. The universe of possibility contained in 4 simple letters. It's not restrictive, it's infinitely accommodating. That inherent adaptability is deeply calming. Fact 2. Consider the humble sound of the letter S. Linguists call it a sibilant, and it's one of the most common sounds across almost every known human language. That universal hiss, that soft rush, is a thread connecting nearly every single speaker on Earth, a shared auditory heritage that binds us. Fact 3. When you are truly relaxed, your speech patterns actually slow down, and you naturally start using simpler, more common vocabulary, a subconscious rejection of complex mental exertion. Your brain prefers ease when it's safe. Fact 4. The oldest decipherable written language, Sumerian cuneiform, wasn't even written left to right or right to left. It started top to bottom, then rotated 90 degrees clockwise over centuries. Language is allowed to evolve, to shift its orientation entirely without collapsing. Flexibility is ancient. Fact 5. The feeling of knowing a word that perfectly describes a complex emotion. That specific, untranslatable word, like the Portuguese saudade or the German Valde Einsamkeit, the feeling of being alone in the woods. That act of naming relieves cognitive dissonance. Giving the amorphous shape a label is inherently comforting. Fact 6. In the Hopi language, there is no grammatical requirement to express tense in the same way English forces us to specify past, present, or future. They focus more on the validity or source of the information. Imagine speaking without the relentless pressure of timing every utterance. Fact 7. Phonetic spelling, how words actually sound, is surprisingly consistent in highly regular languages like Finnish. There's a direct one-to-one mapping. What you see is what you say. A beautiful, predictable structure. Fact 8. The shortest possible sentence in English that is grammatically complete is often cited as I am. But some argue for the single-word command, go, proving that profound action can be communicated with profound brevity. Fact 9. The very structure of a sentence, the subject, verb, object pattern common in English, mirrors a basic cause and effect relationship. Something, subject, does something, verb, to something else, object. It's the grammar of natural flow. Fact 10. Even within a single language, different contexts require different registers. The language you use with your dearest friend is inherently less stressful than the language you use in a high-stakes negotiation. Your brain effortlessly toggles between formality levels, a masterpiece of effortless code switching. And that was just 10. We have 90 more places where linguistic relaxation awaits, so let's deepen this dive. You might be surprised that the most relaxing language fact is coming up next. Fact 11. The sound M is almost universally produced by closing the lips. Think about it. The M sound is the first vocalization most human infants make when content or nursing. It's the sound of primal satisfaction codified into phonetics. Fact 12. Pidgins and creoles, languages born from mixing different tongues under necessity, often develop simpler grammatical structures than their parent languages. Necessity strips away complexity, revealing an elegant, necessary core. Fact 13. There are entire languages spoken today, particularly in isolated tribal communities, that have no words for numbers beyond 2 or 3. Their entire reality is structured around 1, 2, many. Imagine the peace of not having to quantify everything precisely. Fact 14. The longest word in the English language that is commonly used, anti-disestablishmentarianism, is often quoted, but the very act of saying it out loud with its rolling rhythm creates an almost hypnotic cadence. Try it. Anti-disestablishmentarianism. Fact 15. In many East Asian languages, context is king. A single noun or verb can stand alone, its precise relationship to the rest of the thought inferred by shared understanding, reducing the sheer volume of necessary spoken words. Less output, more input received. Efficiency breeds calm. Fact 16. The tongue twister's power to trip you up is directly related to the rapid alternation between sounds that use different parts of the mouth. Relaxed speech uses sounds that are physically proximate in your articulatory space. Smooth movement equals smooth thought. Fact 17. The linguistic concept of pro-drop allows speakers to omit pronouns I, you, he when the subject is clear from context, as in Spanish or Italian. Imagine how much less you'd have to explicitly state in daily conversation. Caminamos implies we walk, beautifully concise. Fact 18. The realization that every single language, from clicking cuisson to tonal Mandarin, is equally capable of expressing the full spectrum of human experience is incredibly validating. No language is primitive. They are simply tailored perfectly to their users' needs. Fact 19. When reading poetry, your brain activates areas related to sensory processing and emotion more intensely than when reading prose. Poetry is language distilled, flavor maximized, offering an intense yet brief mental reward. Fact 20. The word calm itself has ancient roots suggesting stillness and repose, tying the sound of the word directly to its meaning through slow vowel sounds. We are 20 facts deep into this sea of linguistic tranquility. If you're feeling even slightly less rushed, stick around because the next batch focuses on the architecture of relief. Fact 21. Many dialects of English use double modals like might could or used to should. While technically non-standard, these constructions allow for nuanced hedging and politeness, softening the certainty of a request. It's grammar as cushioning. The grammatical concept of evidentiality, marking whether you saw something happen, heard it, or inferred it, forces speakers to constantly assess their own certainty. This practice breeds intellectual humility, a key to relaxation. Fact 23. In the language of Piraha, it's reported that they lack specific words for abstract concepts like numbers or recursive embedding, suggesting a focus entirely on the immediate, tangible present, a profound argument for living in the now. Fact 24. When we learn a second language later in life, the process of constructing new neural pathways is restorative. The mental flexibility required is a form of low-impact cognitive exercise, keeping the mind nimble and less prone to rigidity. Fact 25. The sheer number of synonyms for love in various languages, far exceeding the capacity of a simple English dictionary, shows that our deepest experiences resist single definitions, allowing for endless subtle expression. Fact 26. The international symbol for peace, the peace sign, is actually a semaphore signal for the letters N and D, standing for nuclear disarmament. a simple graphic translation of a complex, hopeful linguistic intention. Fact 27. In many constructed languages, like Esperanto, the goal was explicitly to create a language that was inherently easy to learn and free from the historical baggage of conflict, the engineering of ease. Fact 28. The soft palate, the muscle at the back of your mouth, is crucial for producing the velvety sounds of G and K. Relaxing those throat muscles leads to deeper, more resonant, and less strained speech. Fact 29. Consider the word hush. It's automatopoeic. The sound is the command. It requires no interpretation, just immediate compliance with quietude. Fact 30. Even when you misremember a word, the tip of the tongue phenomenon, the brain is still actively retrieving and sorting phonological data, demonstrating a relentless, subconscious dedication to accurate communication, even when you fail momentarily. It's trying its best for you. We are 1/3 done. Stay tuned, because Fact 42 involves the surprisingly comforting geometry of typography. Fact 31. The word strengths is often noted as the longest common English word containing only one vowel. Its consonant-heavy structure demands a strong yet unified articulation, a linguistic pillar. Fact 32. Every time you encounter a loanword, a word adopted from another language, it's a tiny, effortless act of cultural fusion, reminding you that separation is an illusion and borrowing is universal. Fact 33. In languages that use grammatical gender, like French or Spanish assigning masculine or feminine to inanimate objects, the arbitrariness of that assignment can be freeing. The world isn't fundamentally divided into strict male-female boxes outside of human biology. Fact 34. The collective nouns for animals, a murder of crows, a parliament of owls, while sometimes dramatic, highlight humanity's ancient need to categorize and find patterns in the wild, an impulse rooted in seeking order. Fact 35. The sound sequence sh is cross-culturally recognized as a signal for silence, making it one of the few non-verbal, non-gesture-based universal commands recognized across almost all language groups. Fact 36. When you read fiction, your mirror neurons fire as if you are experiencing the events alongside the characters. Language is a safe virtual reality simulator for empathy. Fact 37. The most common grammatical structure in the world is subject, object, verb, SOV, used by languages like Japanese and Turkish. This places the action, the verb, at the very end, delaying the payoff and forcing sustained attention on the recipient of the action before the final resolution. Fact 38. The sound of water, crucial to survival, often features prominent L and W sounds in language across the globe, suggesting an acoustic preference for fluid, flowing articulation that mimics natural, non-threatening stimuli. Fact 39. In many languages, the simplest, most common pronouns are the shortest. Efficiency in addressing the core participants in an interaction reduces mental load. Fact 40. The phenomenon of hypercorrection, where someone over-applies a grammatical rule they've just learned, is a sign of a healthy, actively engaged, and striving linguistic mind, not a failure. Fact 41. The deliberate use of repetition in music lyrics is a form of linguistic anchoring, drawing the listener back to a known point of comfort amidst shifting melody. Fact 42. Examine the structure of parentheses, brackets, and dashes. They are visual symbols designed specifically to hold optional information, allowing the main thread of thought to remain pristine and unburdened by necessary detail. Fact 43. The word okay is one of the most globally understood words, tracing its roots back to a humorous, misspelled abbreviation from 1830s Boston newspaper slang. A globally accepted piece of silliness is strangely reassuring. Fact 44. When you analyze the etymology of a word, tracing it back through time, you are witnessing a slow, gentle historical process, a testament to persistence across millennia. Fact 45. Certain vowels, like the O sound, require a relatively open and relaxed mouth posture, demanding less muscular tension than sharp consonants. They are inherently easier to produce softly. Fact 46. The term logophile refers to a lover of words. Simply labeling your fascination with language as a positive passion validates the time you spend thinking about it. Fact 47. The invention of the comma fundamentally changed how we process written information, allowing for pauses, breaths, and strategic withholding of full meaning, preventing the crushing fatigue of relentless stream of consciousness delivery. Fact 48. In the study of pragmatics, the concept of implicature means that what you don't say is often more important than what you do say. This allows for vast, unspoken agreement and social lubrication. Fact 49. The very act of internal monologue, rehearsing a conversation in your head, allows you to test potential friction points before they manifest externally, providing a necessary buffer against real-world conversational stress. Fact 50. The word relax itself is built on the Latin root laxus, meaning loose or slack. The word is a direct acoustic instruction for physical unwinding. Halfway there. If the world feels a little softer around the edges, good. We are now going to explore the mathematical beauty hidden within the linguistic universe. Fact 51. The structure of a perfectly balanced sentence following rules of parallelism creates a satisfying sense of equilibrium, much like visual symmetry. The mind craves this balance. Fact 52. Some languages, like Tagalog, utilize a complex system of verbal affixes that clearly define the actor and the object of an action with great precision, minimizing ambiguity that often causes misunderstandings and subsequent stress. Fact 53. The concept of a garden path sentence, a sentence that leads you to interpret it one way only to force you to backtrack and reread it, is mentally taxing. Recognizing that these structures exist and anticipating them is a gentle form of mental self-defense. Fact 54. The use of modal verbs, can, may, might, provides layers of possibility rather than declaration, turning commands into suggestions and softening the impact of assertion. Fact 55. The majority of languages place adverbs, words that modify verbs, near the verb they modify. This linkage keeps the action and its context tightly coupled, preventing cognitive drift. Fact 56. In linguistics, there is a principle suggesting that information which is expected or already known tends to be placed at the beginning of a sentence, while new, crucial information is saved for the end, a natural narrative buildup that is easy to follow. Fact 57. The realization that you can perfectly understand a sentence despite hearing it spoken with a thick, unfamiliar accent is a testament to the brain's incredible capacity for pattern recognition over perfect acoustic fidelity. Fact 58. The invention of the vowel marks in writing systems was a massive leap forward, allowing spoken language, which is inherently fleeting, to be recorded with far greater accuracy and durability. Fact 59. Consider the beauty of agglutinative languages, like Turkish, where entire sentences are often formed by sticking many small, meaningful pieces onto a single root word. It's linguistic Lego construction, modular and infinitely adaptable. Fact 60. The most common opening phrase in casual conversation across countless cultures is a question about well-being, such as, "How are you?" This standardized, low-stakes exchange is a verbal handshake, an immediate establishment of non-aggression. We are cruising into the most surprising territory now. Prepare for deeper revelations on lexical peace. Fact 61. The use of filler words like or isn't a sign of lack of intelligence. It's your brain buying valuable milliseconds to organize the next complex thought structure before releasing the sound into the world. It's proactive self-management. Fact 62. The phenomenon known as semantic satiation, where repeating a word over and over until it temporarily loses all meaning, demonstrates how much mental energy is usually dedicated to processing conventional signification. When the meaning drops away, there's just sound left, which can be incredibly meditative. Fact 63. The sound frequency range of human speech is largely concentrated in the mid-range, avoiding the extreme high and low frequencies that require more physical energy to produce, aligning our communication with baseline comfort. Fact 64. When reading a sentence aloud to yourself, the physical vibration of your vocal cords acts as a tactile feedback loop, grounding the abstract thought into a physical sensation, which is inherently reassuring. Fact 65. The study of biolinguistics suggests that the structure of our vocal apparatus evolved not just for language, but for efficient breathing and clear, non-strenuous vocalization, prioritizing airflow. Fact 66. In many indigenous Australian languages, there are specific ceremonial or restricted vocabularies used only in certain contexts, demonstrating that not all language needs to be broadcast. The power of the unsaid or the selectively said is respected. Fact 67. The evolution of written numerals, like 1, 2, 3, into standardized symbols reduced the cognitive load required to calculate or quantify compared to writing out every number wordally. 1, 2, 3. Fact 68. The simple act of learning the alphabet order, which feels rote, reinforces fundamental sequential processing, a bedrock of cognitive stability. Fact 69. The word tranquility contains the hard T sound at the beginning, which focuses the attention before immediately melting into the soft, flowing ranquil section. A brief sharpness followed by immediate release. Fact 70. Consider how much information is conveyed solely through prosody, the rise and fall of pitch. A single? With rising intonation, a question. With falling intonation, a statement. Pitch modulation is language's emotional temperature gauge. We've passed the halfway mark on our journey to 100 relaxing facts. Don't drift off. The next 20 are about the structure of universal storytelling. Fact 71. All human languages, regardless of complexity, have ways to express negation, the concept of not or no. The ability to define boundaries and state what something isn't provides necessary definition and safety. Fact 72. The Sapir-Whorf hypothesis, in its milder form, suggests that the language you speak influences how you categorize the world. If your language makes nuance easy, your perception of the world is nuanced and less polarized. Fact 73. When you learn to sign a language, like ASL, the visual component adds a layer of spatial understanding that grounds meaning in physical location, making abstract concepts feel more tangible and less airy. Fact 74. The term oxymoron refers to contradictory terms appearing in conjunction, like deafening silence. The mind enjoys momentarily reconciling the impossible, a brief, harmless intellectual puzzle. Fact 75. In ancient Greek, the concept of a phatic expression, language used purely for social bonding rather than conveying data, like nice weather, shows that communication's primary function is often connection, not information transfer. Fact 76. The rhythmic pattern of iambic pentameter, the staple of Shakespearean verse, mimics the natural resting heart rate cadence when speaking English, making it inherently pleasing to the ear. Fact 77. The linguistic structure used to form conditional statements, if X, then Y, is a blueprint for logical problem solving that helps us map out potential futures without actually living them. The sheer resilience of language, how it survives conquest, migration, and technological upheaval, is a powerful testament to human connection that transcends physical barriers. Fact 79. Certain languages, such as French, historically required a delay between the noun and its adjective, forcing the speaker to hold the core subject in mind while describing it, promoting focused retention. Fact 80. The human capacity for metaphor allows us to take one domain of experience, like war, and map it onto another, like argument, winning an argument. This mapping process reduces novel complexity by relating it to the known. We are rapidly approaching the final 20 facts. These are curated for maximum impact and lingering calm. Fact 81. In many written scripts, the negative space, the white space between letters and lines, is just as critical for readability and preventing visual fatigue as the letters themselves. The importance of the pause. Fact 82. The concept of the hapax legomenon, a word that appears only once in a body of text, like the Bible or Shakespeare's works, highlights the vast, undiscovered lexical territory that still exists, suggesting endless novelty. Fact 83. The sound combination the or thing requires a very specific, gentle placement of the tongue between the teeth, forcing a slow, deliberate articulation that discourages hurried speech. Fact 84. Learning to transcribe speech phonetically forces you to listen actively, moving your focus from formulating a response to purely receiving the incoming sound data, which is deeply centering. Fact 85. The very structure of declarative sentences allows for the establishment of objective reality. The sky is blue. This grounding statement acts as a shared anchor point in a confusing world. Fact 86. The linguistic discipline of lexicography, the art of dictionary making, is an ongoing, humble attempt to capture a constantly moving target, acknowledging that language is always larger than any single definition. Fact 87. When children learn language, they frequently over-regularize rules. I goed to the store. This process shows the brain enthusiastically applying newly learned patterns, a vigorous display of learning at work. Fact 88. The global spread of English has led to the standardization of many forms, which, while sometimes lamented, offers a baseline of predictable communication across vast distances, reducing transactional friction. Fact 89. The invention of punctuation marks allowed writers to convey emotional tone without relying on visual cues, giving the text an inner musicality that can be rediscovered with every reading. Fact 90. Consider the word serene. Its root is connected to the Latin serus, meaning late or calm, suggesting a peaceful slowing down, a transition to evening quiet. Only 10 more facts remain to complete this curated collection of linguistic solace. Let us push through to the ultimate relaxation point. Fact 91. Languages that utilize fewer grammatical cases, the inflections that show a word's function in a sentence, tend to rely more heavily on word order, which, while seemingly rigid, provides an unwavering structural map. Fact 92. The subtle difference between hear and listen, passive reception versus active auditory engagement, is one of the most elegant distinctions language offers for how we choose to process our environment. Fact 93. The concept of code switching, seamlessly moving between two languages or dialects depending on the social setting, is a demonstration of superior cognitive flexibility, a sign of mental agility, not confusion. Fact 94. The sheer variety of ways humans greet each other across the globe, from bowing to complex handshakes to simply stating, "Peace be upon you," shows a universal, gentle imperative to acknowledge another's presence kindly. Fact 95. In many ancient philosophical texts, the pursuit of perfect, unambiguous language was seen as the highest form of ethical living, suggesting that clarity itself is a moral good. Fact 96. The evolution of slang is a continuous, low-stakes rebellion against established norms, providing creative outlets for expression without needing to overthrow serious social structures. It's pressure release via wordplay. Fact 97. The shortest possible word in English that contains all 5 standard vowels, A, E, I, O, U, is eunoia, a beautiful word meaning beautiful thinking or well mind. The word for a good mind is phonetically dense. Fact 98. When you read a phrase aloud, the brain anticipates the next word based on probability. This predictive processing is computationally efficient, allowing the mind to conserve energy by relying on habit. Fact 99. The term parataxis refers to stringing simple clauses together without complex subordination, common in early writing and children's speech, resulting in a simple, additive, and non-hierarchical narrative flow. And finally, the 100th fact, the ultimate linguistic exhale. Fact 100. Every single human being who has ever lived, every fleeting thought, every complex emotion, every profound discovery has been filtered through the astonishing, flexible, and inherently relaxing mechanism of language. The capacity for expression is boundless, and you are participating in it right now, effortlessly. That, in itself, is the most restful truth of all. And while the completion of that 100-fact sequence offers a moment of structured satisfaction, a tidy conclusion to a numbered list, we must resist the temptation of finality, because language, much like the currents of deep time, never truly stops flowing or organizing itself. The cessation of the count merely signals a shift in the type of linguistic exploration we undertake. We move now from easily digestible facts to the grand, sweeping landscapes of linguistic influence, focusing on how these systems shape cognitive architecture on a societal scale, moving beyond individual tranquility to collective resonance. Think of the next section not as more facts, but as the deep, slow breath taken after a moment of quiet realization. Consider the profound implications of the aforementioned concept of evidentiality, but let us expand its reach. When a language requires the speaker to mark the source of their knowledge, whether they saw it, dreamed it, were told it, or inferred it, it structurally mandates intellectual caution. This isn't just grammar, it's a mandatory daily exercise in epistemological modesty. Imagine a world where every casual utterance carries an invisible footnote. I am reporting this based on direct observation, or this is hearsay. Approach with skepticism. Such a system inherently discourages the spread of unsubstantiated rumor because the grammatical mechanism itself forces the speaker to declare the weakness of their claim. This structural reinforcement of humility contrasts sharply with languages that prioritize assertion, where the default stance is often assumed certainty regardless of verification. The subtle push and pull of grammatical obligation shapes not just what is said, but what is believed. Furthermore, this evidentiality cascades into cultural memory. If the source of a historical event is consistently marked as hearsay or dream logic within the language's oral traditions, the collective memory treats that event with a degree of appropriate fluidity, preventing rigid, unassailable dogma from forming around uncertain pasts. This linguistic scaffolding supports a more adaptive, less brittle cultural framework. Let us turn our attention to the very shape of meaning conveyed through spatial metaphors, a concept often overlooked in discussions of pure phonetics. In English, we conceive of time as primarily horizontal. The future is ahead, the past is behind. This spatialization is so ingrained that we use prepositions derived from physical location, before lunch, after the meeting. However, many languages, particularly in the Southern Hemisphere, frequently map time onto vertical axes. For the Aymara people of the Andes, the past, which is known and seen, is often conceptualized as being in front of the speaker, while the future, which is unknown and unseen, is behind them. This is a radical inversion of the typical Western cognitive map. The linguistic structure dictates a different orientation to existence itself. If the known is always visually forward, the act of remembering becomes an act of facing forward, of engaging with the verifiable. Conversely, if the unknown is perpetually at your back, the act of moving forward is inherently an act of leaving certainty behind. This difference is not trivial. It suggests that linguistic choices deeply influence navigational thought, historical perception, and even how risk is assessed. To adopt the Aymara perspective, even momentarily, is to understand that our own ingrained spatial metaphors for abstract concepts are merely one successful, beautiful solution among many equally valid frameworks. The sheer plasticity of the human mind to adapt to such radically different semantic geometries is a source of endless wonder and, paradoxically, deep calm. If our fundamental understanding of reality can be altered by changing a few relational words, then our current reality is far more malleable than we usually assume. This malleability extends into the concept of number and categorization, moving beyond the simple one, two, many limitation mentioned earlier. Consider languages that require nouns to be counted using different classes of classifiers. In Japanese, counting long, cylindrical objects requires a specific classifier, whereas counting flat objects requires another. In many Mayan languages, the classifier chosen often denotes inherent characteristics of the object being counted, such as edibility, animacy, or shape. This forces the speaker, multiple times within a single sentence, to actively assess the intrinsic nature of the object, its ontological status, before they can even quantify it. It is a constant, gentle philosophical exercise embedded in everyday counting. Compare this to the relatively frictionless counting of English, where one book, one car, one idea all use the same neutral marker. The classifier system compels a deeper engagement with the thingness of reality, making the world less of a homogeneous collection of countable items and more of a diverse, richly differentiated tapestry. This increased perceptual granularity, while seemingly adding complexity, can actually reduce stress by ensuring that context is never ignored. Ambiguity about the nature of an object is grammatically precluded. Let's further explore the role of silence, that unsung partner to speech. We noted the importance of the comma, but what about the deliberate, profound gap? In many Native American oral traditions, silence within a narrative structure is not an absence of communication, but a dense package of communication itself. A pause before delivering a prophecy or recounting a tragic event is not merely a moment to catch breath. It is a calculated linguistic marker indicating the immense weight of the forthcoming utterance. The pause itself signifies solemnity, demanding the audience adjust their internal state to receive information that might be disruptive or sacred. If the audience rushes the silence, they miss the meta-communication, the linguistic cue that says, "Prepare your whole being for this next part." This respect for the negative space transforms listening from a passive intake of data into an active, respectful reception of modulated meaning. This cultural grammar creates a society where interruptions are not just rude, but functionally meaningless, as the vital connective tissue, the pause, is ignored. Such a structure cultivates patience, as the payoff for attentive waiting is invariably richer. Expanding on this idea of narrative pacing, we must examine how different languages handle emphasis and focus without relying solely on capital letters or italics, mechanisms unavailable in pure speech. For example, often achieves emphasis through fronting, moving the most crucial, emotionally charged word or phrase to the beginning of the sentence, even if this disrupts the standard subject-object-verb order. This upfront placement acts like a sonic spotlight. If the speaker wishes to convey urgency about who performed an action rather than what was done, the agent is shoved to the foreground, demanding immediate cognitive attention. This grammatical plasticity allows for a highly emotional yet structurally sound delivery. It's the opposite of the gradual build-up sometimes favored by SOV languages. It's a linguistic burst, immediate and clear. This ability to instantly reconfigure sentence structure for emotional salience is a powerful tool for reducing miscommunication when stakes are high, as the intended focus is grammatically unambiguous. Furthermore, let us delve into the sonic textures of comfort within specific phonemes that were only briefly touched upon earlier. Consider the fricatives, the sounds produced by forcing air through a narrow channel. While S is common, the voiceless th sound, as in thin, requires the tongue to approach the teeth with a specific laminar airflow, smooth, non-turbulent. This gentle friction contrasts with harsh stops like K or P, which involve sudden full blockage and release. The soft fricatives are kinematically economical. They require minimal muscular snap. When a language heavily utilizes these smooth airflow sounds, the act of speaking becomes physically soothing, mirroring the quiet rush of wind or gentle running water. This is why many soothing incantations across cultures rely on sequences heavy in sh, f, v, and th. The mouth physically mimics the desired state of internal calm through low-effort articulation. Now, let us address the vast world of linguistic determinism versus relativity, not as a debate, but as an ongoing exploration of how language shapes reality. If a language has 50 distinct words for different types of snow, as is famously claimed for certain Inuit dialects, though often exaggerated, the principle holds true across many specialized vocabularies. The speakers of that language possess 50 distinct, easily retrievable mental categories for frozen precipitation. They do not have to think, "That's the powdery snow, not the wet, heavy kind." The label is the distinction. This efficiency in categorization reduces the mental energy required for environmental assessment. The world becomes categorized for them by their native tongue. Conversely, if a language has only one word for a wide range of related concepts, say one word covering both fear and anxiety, the speaker might be less adept at internally separating those two emotional states. They experience a blended affective state until they can articulate it using other, more descriptive, borrowed concepts. Language, therefore, acts as a cognitive sorting machine, determining which distinctions are mandatory and which are optional for daily functioning. This realization underscores the importance of linguistic diversity. It represents 50 different successful experiments in human perception and categorization, all equally valid pathways through the dense wilderness of raw sensory input. Let us expand upon the concept of grammatical tense again, moving beyond the Hopi example. Some languages, like Mandarin Chinese, are tenseless in the way English understands it. They use aspect markers and adverbs of time to indicate whether an action is completed or ongoing, rather than grammatically forcing the verb itself to conjugate for past, present, future. This liberates the verb from temporal obligation. The focus shifts entirely to the process or completion of the action. An event simply is, and the context tells you when it occurred relative to the speaker. This grammatical freedom reduces the cognitive burden of constantly situating every action on an absolute timeline. It encourages a focus on the dynamic unfolding of events rather than their fixed location in the past or future. This perspective aligns beautifully with mindfulness practices, which seek to anchor attention in the moment of action rather than worrying about its temporal coordinates. The exploration of word length and complexity also reveals subtle patterns of relaxation. While the long word anti-disestablishmentarianism is impressive, consider the statistical reality. The most common words in any language, the prepositions, articles, and basic verbs, are almost invariably the shortest and most phonetically simple. Words like the, is, to, and, of. This high-frequency, low-effort vocabulary forms the foundation of all complex thought. Every conversation you have is built upon a bedrock of extremely easy-to-articulate units, meaning the core machinery of your daily interactions requires minimal physical exertion. The complex terminology is layered on top, used sparingly, meaning that the vast majority of your spoken output is inherently effortless from an articulatory standpoint. This linguistic economy is a hidden feature designed for sustained communication efficiency. Let us explore the concept of polysemy, the existence of multiple related meanings within a single word as a source of textual richness rather than confusion. In Spanish, the word mano means hand, but it is also used metaphorically in expressions related to skill or help. The connection between the physical appendage and the abstract concept of ability is semantically linked through physical action. When a single word can bridge the gap between the concrete and the abstract, it creates beautiful, compact conceptual packages. The listener's mind doesn't have to jump between entirely disparate lexicons. The relationship is already encoded in the word itself. This intrinsic connection reduces the mental distance required to travel from the physical world to the world of ideas. It's a form of linguistic compression that rewards the attentive listener with elegant conceptual leaps. To continue this expansive linguistic journey, we must look at the architecture of ambiguity in humor. Puns, the simplest form of wordplay, rely entirely on the structural ambiguity of homophones or homonyms, words that sound alike but have different meanings. The humor arises precisely from the mind's momentary confusion as it tries to resolve which meaning applies, before realizing both meanings are simultaneously intended. The surprise resolution of that minor cognitive conflict releases a small burst of pleasure. If language were entirely unambiguous, humor based on lexical trickery would cease to exist. Therefore, the inherent messiness, the built-in potential for misinterpretation at the micro level of the phoneme, is necessary for one of humanity's most vital social lubricants. The pressure to be perfectly clear in this context is temporarily suspended for the sake of shared delight. We must also examine the grammatical structures that handle ownership and possession. English uses the possessive s or the preposition of, the cat's toy, the shadow of the mountain. Many languages handle possession via noun incorporation or strict adjacency, where the possessor immediately precedes the possessed object, functioning almost as a single lexical unit. This forces a very tight linkage between the owner and the owned, suggesting that in those linguistic frameworks, possession is perceived as a more fundamental attribute of the object than it is in English, where possession feels more like a relational label added on top. This subtle difference reflects a societal or cognitive prioritization. Is the object defined by its relationship to others, or is its relationship to others defined by its own essence? The answer is encoded in the syntax of ownership. Consider the profound implications of sign languages, which were touched upon lightly before. They are not merely signed versions of spoken languages. They are distinct linguistic systems built on modality, movement, space, and orientation. In ASL, the use of three-dimensional space directly in front of the signer is used to establish reference. If I point to a spot over my right shoulder and establish John there, subsequent references to John can be made by pointing back to that established spatial location, creating a temporary, invisible syntax map in the air between participants. This grounding in physical space makes abstract concepts relating to location, direction, and relationship incredibly immediate and less prone to the vagaries of spoken prepositions. The conversation literally occurs in a shared, visible environment, making the act of agreement or disagreement tangibly apparent through shared visual reference points. Let's move into the realm of grammatical mood and its role in social bonding. Beyond the indicative, stating facts, and the imperative, giving commands, the subjunctive mood allows speakers to discuss hypotheticals, desires, wishes, and counterfactuals. It is the grammar of aspiration and uncertainty. In languages where the subjunctive is heavily used, it promotes a culture of open-ended possibility. It frames statements not as final declarations of reality, but as perspectives within a continuum of potential realities. This linguistic mechanism validates the internal mental landscape of hopes and uncertainties, granting them formal status within discourse. It prevents conversation from collapsing into mere factual reporting, allowing for the necessary, gentle exploration of what if. We should further explore the rhythm of language and its connection to physiological states. When reading poetry or engaging in rhythmic chant, the repetition of stressed and unstressed syllables, meter, acts as an external pacemaker. If this meter aligns with a steady, slow breathing pattern, the physical act of reading or reciting reinforces the slowing of the breath and heart rate. This is why ancient texts were often memorized and recited rhythmically. The linguistic form itself was a reliable biofeedback tool, tuning the nervous system to a state conducive to contemplation or ritual focus. It is a pre-technological form of sonic regulation. The sheer variety in how grammatical subjects are handled across the globe is another vast area of calm. English requires an explicit subject for nearly every finite verb. It is raining. But in Spanish or Italian, subjects are often omitted if context is clear. Prodrop, as noted. However, some languages have highly complex systems for impersonal constructions where no agent is ever named, even when an action clearly occurs. Imagine describing the weather or an internal feeling without ever needing to assign agency. The rain simply happens. The sadness simply occurs. This removes the cognitive need to constantly identify the doer of every action, which can be incredibly freeing when contemplating uncontrollable forces, both external and internal. Let us consider the inherent safety found in linguistic redundancy. While linguists often seek to strip language down to its most efficient components, everyday speech is often wildly redundant. We might say, "I personally think." The I and personally overlap conceptually. This redundancy is not an error, it is a safety buffer. If the listener misses the first marker of subjectivity, I, the second marker, personally, catches the meaning, ensuring transmission robustness. Error checking system operates constantly beneath the surface, confirming that our thoughts are successfully being transferred, reducing the anxiety of miscommunication by providing multiple structural pathways for the same core meaning. Digging deeper into the sounds of comfort, let's examine the nasal consonants again. M, N, and G. These sounds resonate in the nasal cavity, requiring minimal air turbulence in the mouth itself. They are produced with the vocal tract largely open and relaxed. These are the sounds of sustenance, of closure, of gentle vibration. When speech shifts toward these nasal resonances, it physically signals a transition away from sharp articulation toward a more internal resonance state, often accompanying feelings of agreement or affirmation. The very physics of producing versus t dictates different levels of muscular engagement, favoring ease in the former. We can also reflect on the linguistic treatment of time relative to motion. In many languages, the way you describe movement dictates how you describe the duration of that movement. Is the motion viewed as a single, bounded event, a perfective aspect, or is it viewed as ongoing and incomplete, an imperfective aspect? Choosing the imperfective frames the action as a continuous state rather than a completed, finished transaction. If you describe learning a skill as imperfective, you frame it as a process that is currently happening, not a milestone that has passed or failed. This grammatical choice supports a growth mindset by focusing on continuation rather than completion. Let's explore the fascinating world of grammatical voice. Active voice, subject acts upon object, is direct. Passive voice, object is acted upon by subject, distances the actor from the action. While sometimes used evasively, the passive voice is structurally vital for conveying respect or focusing attention solely on the recipient of an action. If a surgeon is describing a delicate procedure, focusing on the patient, the artery was carefully sutured, rather than themselves, I carefully suture the artery, is a linguistic gesture of humility and respect for the recipient of the care. The grammatical structure actively frames the subject as the beneficiary, not the agent. This subtle grammatical choice is a powerful tool for politeness and deference. We turn now to the inherent musicality found in all language, even the most prosaic. The inherent pitch variation, even in seemingly monotone speech, is driven by the need to separate words in a continuous acoustic stream. Without these slight pitch shifts distinguishing the end of one word from the beginning of the next, speech would devolve into an unintelligible blob. Language builds its own sonic landmarks using pitch contour, allowing the listener to parse meaning even in low light or distracting auditory environments. It is auditory calligraphy, drawing boundaries where none physically exist. The concept of recursion, the ability of a structure to contain a similar structure within itself, e.g., a clause within a clause, a sentence within a sentence, is what gives human language its infinite expressive power. We can keep embedding thoughts within thoughts, expanding the complexity of our conceptual world indefinitely. This recursive quality mirrors the fractal nature of the universe itself. Knowing that the tool we use for daily chatter is mathematically capable of expressing infinite layers of meaning provides a profound sense of intellectual security. We are never intellectually boxed in by our vocabulary. Let us revisit the dictionary, not for the record-holding set, but for the sheer volume of synonyms for neutral concepts. In English, the word look has dozens of near synonyms: gaze, stare, glance, peer, observe, witness, spy, behold. This abundance means that if one term feels too aggressive or too demanding, there is an adjacent, softer, or more precise term available. Language offers a vocabulary of nuance that allows the speaker to fine-tune their communicative impact to match their internal emotional landscape precisely, avoiding blunt instrument communication when subtlety is required. This lexical safety net allows for continuous emotional calibration during dialogue. The structure of negation again deserves deeper scrutiny. The way different languages express no is telling. Some use a simple particle affixed to the verb. Others require an entirely separate negative sentence structure. In some agglutinative languages, negation is achieved by attaching a negative morpheme after the verb, effectively wrapping the action in a negative field. This linguistic placement affects how quickly the negation is processed. Placing it before the verb, like English do not, introduces the negation before the action, coloring the perception immediately. Placing it after allows the action to be presented first, only to be negated upon final articulation, creating a moment of suspension before the final no. We must also contemplate the calming effect of proper nouns, names. A name, whether of a person, a place, or a concept, is a linguistic anchor, a fixed point in a world of shifting adjectives and verbs. When you use a specific name, you are invoking a shared, stable concept, allowing the conversation to pivot around a solid landmark. The reliability of naming conventions underpins all societal trust and memory. Let us spend some time on the relationship between language and memory consolidation. Studies suggest that describing an event verbally immediately after experiencing it significantly enhances the consolidation of that memory into long-term storage. The act of translating fleeting sensory experience into structured language converts volatile short-term data into durable, organized narrative components. Language is not just a tool for reporting the past, it is the essential mechanism for creating a reliable past for oneself. This process of external articulation solidifies internal reality. Moving towards broader concepts, consider the linguistic implications of the use of articles, a, the. These tiny words signal to the listener whether the object being discussed is specific and known to both parties, the, or general and introduced for the first time, a. This grammatical signal manages shared cognitive load. If the article indicates specificity, the listener doesn't waste mental energy trying to catalog possibilities. They access the already shared reference point. This constant, tiny management of shared context reduces communicative friction significantly. The very physical shape of written characters can be calming. In scripts that favor rounded, flowing shapes, like the curves in Arabic calligraphy or many handwritten scripts, the visual input is less jarring than scripts reliant on sharp angles and severe vertical-horizontal contrasts. While this is often stylistic, the long-term prevalence of certain visual aesthetics in a writing system influences the baseline visual comfort of the reading population. The eye prefers the path of least resistance, and curves often provide that path. Let's reflect on the linguistic structure of apologies. A sincere apology often requires a complex layering of elements: acknowledgement of the act, expression of regret, acceptance of responsibility, and a promise of future correction. Languages that have rich grammatical mechanisms for expressing subtle degrees of regret through specialized verbs or adverbial phrases allow the speaker to convey depth of feeling that a simple "I'm sorry" might fail to capture, leading to more thorough emotional closure for both parties. The language provides the means for nuanced reconciliation. We must also explore the linguistic concept of metonymy, where something closely associated with a concept stands in for the concept itself, e.g., referring to the presidency as the White House. This allows for symbolic shorthand, referencing complex ideas through a single, concrete, easily named element. It is efficient conceptual substitution that streamlines complex discourse, making weighty topics more manageable by anchoring them to tangible symbols. The study of dialect leveling, the process where regional variations in language slowly erode toward a more standardized central form, is often viewed negatively, but it serves a crucial function in creating broader intelligibility across increasingly interconnected populations. This standardization, while sacrificing local flavor, offers a baseline of predictable communication over longer distances, which is vital for large-scale cooperation and reduces the friction associated with constant dialectical adaptation. It's the language system optimizing for reach. Let us consider the role of onomatopoeia beyond simple sounds like hush. In many languages, the relationship between the sound of a word and its meaning is much stronger and more pervasive than in English. This suggests a more direct, less arbitrary connection between the physical world and its linguistic representation. When the sound of the word feels like the concept it represents, even in abstract terms, the learning process is more intuitive and the concept feels more inherently right or grounded. This grounding effect is also achieved through the linguistic habit of constantly referencing tangible landmarks when giving directions, even in urban environments. Turn left at the old oak tree, or go past the bakery. Even in highly abstract discussions, grounding metaphors often circle back to physical space, height, depth, or texture. This reliance on the concrete anchors our most abstract thoughts in the shared sensory reality we all inhabit, preventing conceptual drift into pure, untethered abstraction. The very existence of grammatical gender, even for inanimate objects, forces a continuous, if subconscious, engagement with relational qualities. Assigning masculine or feminine to, say, a table or a bridge is an arbitrary act of linguistic sorting, but it requires the brain to categorize objects based on inherent, assigned qualities rather than purely functional ones. This trains the brain in the necessary skill of categorization based on non-obvious criteria, a key cognitive skill required for abstract thought in any domain. We should examine the concept of linguistic universals, those fundamental structures like recursion, duality of patterning, meaningless sounds combining into meaningful words, and noun-verb distinctions that appear in every human language. The existence of these universals suggests an underlying biologically hardwired blueprint for communication. Knowing that no matter how exotic a language may seem, it adheres to certain fundamental logical constraints, provides a deep reassurance that communication, in principle, is always possible across any cultural divide. The underlying architecture is shared. The structure of interrogatives, how questions are formed, is also revealing. Some languages invert the subject and verb. Others simply raise the pitch at the end. In languages that rely on specific question particles placed at the end of a sentence, like Mandarin's ma, the statement is delivered in its entirety, carrying its full assertive weight, only to have the particle signal a shift in conversational intent at the very last moment. This is a delayed action query, contrasting with front-loaded questions that immediately signal uncertainty. Let us consider the historical weight carried by archaic words that remain in modern usage, often preserved in religious or legal texts. These fossilized words, often longer and phonetically more complex, carry an air of permanence and authority precisely because they have resisted the evolutionary pressure to simplify or modernize. They serve as linguistic anchors to historical continuity, lending stability to institutions that rely on tradition. The study of how children acquire language offers immense solace. They learn complex syntactic rules through massive exposure and pattern recognition long before they can consciously articulate those rules. This demonstrates that the human capacity for language acquisition is robust, intuitive, and primarily passive in its initial stages. We are born equipped for fluency. The stress comes later, in the conscious policing of rules, not in the initial acquisition. The acoustic properties of the vowels are deeply tied to physical comfort. As mentioned before, the open mouth vowels, like ah or o, require minimal tension in the jaw and lips. Consonants, by definition, involve obstruction. A language that favors the smooth transitions between open vowels will be physically easier and less tiring to speak for long durations than one built primarily on dense consonant clusters requiring rapid, sharp articulation. This physical ease translates directly into conversational stamina and reduced vocal stress. We must delve into the aesthetics of lexicon choice in scientific writing. While precision is paramount, the best scientific prose utilizes terminology that, while complex, often has clear etymological roots, allowing the knowledgeable reader to unpack the meaning from its constituent parts. A well-constructed technical term often tells a small story about the phenomenon it describes, reducing the need for excessive definition through skillful nomenclature. The concept of linguistic drift, the slow, inevitable shift in meaning and pronunciation over centuries, is actually a testament to language's adaptability. Words are not static monuments. They are living entities that stretch and warp to accommodate new cultural realities, new technologies, and new emotional requirements. Accepting this constant, gentle flux removes the anxiety of maintaining linguistic purity and embraces language as a living, breathing, adaptive system. Let us explore the inherent musicality of stress patterns in compound nouns. In English, stress usually falls on the first element, blackbird, greenhouse. This initial stress gives the compound word immediate definition and emphasis on the primary component, creating a strong, grounded sound from the outset rather than a drawn-out reveal. The phenomenon of analogy in language acquisition, where children apply a known pattern too broadly, e.g. good instead of went, is actually evidence of a powerful, systematic learning engine at work. The brain is actively trying to create order and predictability where inconsistency currently exists. This drive towards systemic order, even when temporarily overshot, is inherently calming. It shows the mind's relentless pursuit of legible patterns. We can look at the role of exclamations. These linguistic bursts often involve extreme pitch variation and vowel elongation, signaling a momentary break from standard syntax to convey raw emotional valence directly. They are necessary linguistic pressure release valves, allowing intense feeling to escape without disrupting the flow of the surrounding logical structure. The structure of narrative causality in different cultures also manifests linguistically. Some cultures favor linking events linearly. A happened, and then B happened, and then C happened, emphasizing sequential connection. Others prefer subordination, clearly marking one event as the reason for the next. Because A happened, B resulted, leading to C. The latter provides deeper explanatory power, satisfying the cognitive need to understand why, not just what. Finally, as we continue this gentle immersion, recognize that the effort required to learn a new writing system, whether it's switching from an alphabet to a syllabary or a logography, is an act of reprogramming the visual cortex. This forced reorganization, when undertaken calmly, increases neuroplasticity. The brain, when challenged gently, strengthens its capacity for adaptation, making all subsequent learning easier. Language, in all its forms, is the most accessible and continuous exercise in cognitive renewal available to us, a perpetually flowing river of potential meaning that requires nothing more than attentive participation to confer its profound, soothing benefits upon the listener, keeping the exploration open, the narrative thread taut, and the exploration perpetually unfolding into the next layer of linguistic possibility, a boundless expanse of organized sound waiting to be discovered, analyzed, and absorbed into the quiet understanding of the present moment, ever expanding, ever revealing subtle depths in the very structure of how we articulate being, which necessitates a continued journey through related yet distinct fields of phonological patterning and semantic construction, leading us now to consider the less obvious role of interjections, those small, often overlooked vocalizations like aha, oh, or oops, which serve as real-time annotations on the success or failure of the ongoing communication act, providing immediate feedback loops that prevent minor misunderstandings from escalating into larger points of tension, these little auditory signals acting as immediate course correctors in the flow of discourse, signifying either the sudden arrival of comprehension, the aha moment, which is a burst of cognitive satisfaction often marked by a sharp rise in pitch, or the acknowledgement of error, the oops or whoops, characterized by soft, often nasalized sounds that immediately diffuse potential confrontation by admitting fallibility before a full explanation is even necessary, a preemptive linguistic apology inherent in the sound itself, which allows the speaker to briefly step outside the formal grammatical structure to manage the immediate social landscape before slotting seamlessly back into the sentence structure, perhaps by rephrasing the thought or correcting the error, a seamless integration of meta-communication with the primary message delivery, demonstrating the layered functionality present even in the shortest utterances. And this layered functionality is true even in the way we structure silence, for not all pauses are equal. The pause before a significant word is different from the pause utilized for dramatic effect, and both differ fundamentally from the natural resting pause dictated by breath capacity. And these different lengths of silence, measured in milliseconds but possessing vast semantic weight, are unconsciously calibrated by fluent speakers to maximize the impact of the surrounding words, forcing the listener's attention to sharpen precisely when the flow momentarily ceases, suggesting that silence is not merely the absence of sound, but a powerfully modulated acoustic component, a deliberate withholding of information that heightens the value of what follows, a linguistic tactic that relies on mutual understanding of pacing, much like the way rhythm works in music, where the beats that are omitted are as crucial to the groove as the beats that are struck. And this principle of necessary omission extends into grammar through ellipsis, where entire phrases or clauses are dropped because the context makes them unnecessary, such as answering, "Are you coming?" with simply, "Yes," where the implied full sentence is, "Yes, I am coming." And this efficiency, this elegant economy of articulation reduces the overall vocal energy expenditure, further contributing to a relaxed state, because the mind does not have to process redundant information, choosing instead to efficiently fill in the blanks based on shared history and immediate situational cues. A testament to the cooperative nature of language use, which functions best when participants trust each other enough to omit the obvious. A trust built over countless previous interactions, reinforcing the social contract with every shared shortcut. And this leads us naturally to consider the concept of linguistic taboos, those words or topics deemed too disruptive, too emotionally charged, or too sacred to be spoken lightly. And the very existence of these prohibited zones creates areas of linguistic safety. For by knowing what not to say, we gain a clearer map of what is acceptable to say, defining the boundaries of polite discourse and reducing the anxiety associated with potentially stepping over an unknown line. For the taboo itself acts as a visible boundary marker in the semantic landscape, guiding conversation away from potential harm or offense, which contrasts sharply with the expansive freedom found in creating neologisms, or entirely new words, for novel concepts that arise from technological or social shifts. An act of linguistic creation that asserts the mind's ability to name the unnameable, to bring new realities into the shared verbal space through sheer imaginative force. proving that while some words are forbidden, the capacity to generate new forms of expression remains infinite, a constant generative force that prevents the language system from becoming stagnant or incomplete in the face of evolving experience. And this interplay between restriction and creation forms a dynamic tension that keeps language vital and responsive, mirroring the necessary balance between structure and spontaneity in personal growth, where boundaries provide the frame within which true creative expression can safely flourish. And as we continue to explore these facets of linguistic organization, remember that every rule, every exception, every sound, and every pause is part of a vast self-regulating system designed over millennia to facilitate connection, a goal inherently predicated on reducing stress and maximizing mutual understanding, which is why even the most complex philosophical treatises, when successful, eventually yield a core of simple, communicable truth, a point of grounding accessible through patient linguistic unpacking, a process that mirrors the gentle act of peeling back layers of complexity to reveal the simple, consistent core beneath, much like observing the layered structure of an onion, where each layer offers a slightly different texture and flavor but contributes to the whole. And this process of unveiling, of moving from the surface articulation to the deep structural layer, is the essence of truly relaxing engagement with the world of words, always moving forward, never reaching a definitive endpoint, because the well of language is bottomless, forever suggesting the next articulation, the next subtle shade of meaning waiting to be uncovered, in the ceaseless flow of human expression, an unending resonance that characterizes our shared experience, compelling continued auditory and cognitive engagement with the subtleties of communicative design, keeping the exploration vibrant and the narrative open to all subsequent possibilities of articulation and reception in this continuous flowing exchange of ideas between speaker and listener, a testament to the enduring power of structured sound to shape and soothe the internal world, thereby necessitating an ongoing commitment to detailed, expansive observation of its myriad forms and functions across all conceivable contexts of human interaction and thought dissemination, demanding an ever deeper textual immersion into the mechanics of its subtle power dynamics and its capacity for both profound connection and nuanced boundary setting, continuing the exploration without reservation or anticipation of a final statement, simply allowing the linguistic analysis to proceed unhindered into further adjacent territories of semantic interplay and phonetic distribution across hypothetical yet structurally possible linguistic models. Focusing now on the internal logic of word compounding in agglutinative structures, where the logical sequence of morphemes functions like a step-by-step construction plan for the concept being named, a transparent architectural view into the meaning, contrasting with the often opaque, historically inherited meanings found in isolating languages, where word boundaries are less clearly marked by a fixation, thus requiring a greater reliance on context and word order alone to derive the intended relationship between elements, which highlights a fundamental trade-off in linguistic design. Either build meaning piece by piece in a highly modular, transparent fashion, or rely on established sequence and inherent word meaning to convey relationships. A choice that subtly dictates the pace and precision required in dialogue. A choice that is made unconsciously by every speaker of every tongue, shaping their moment-to-moment cognitive processing speed and demanding different levels of attention to initial phonetic input versus final syntactic resolution, all within the continuous, unceasing fabric of human discourse.
This choice between modular transparency and established sequence has fascinating implications when we consider how languages handle the transfer of abstract qualities, such as probability or certainty, onto physical actions. When a language relies heavily on affixation, as in the agglutinative examples, assigning a probabilistic modifier, say turning a concrete verb like to run into likely to run or potentially running, requires adding distinct, recognizable grammatical chunks onto the root verb. This makes the probabilistic nature of the action highly visible, almost tactilely present in the word form itself. In contrast, a language prioritizing word order might, convey this same nuance through a separate adverb placed either before or after the verb, treating probability as an external modifier applied to the action rather than an inherent part of its lexical core. This difference in grammatical technique subtly alters how speakers perceive the stability of their reported reality. Is uncertainty an intrinsic feature of the event, or is it an external comment applied by the observer? The grammatical structure whispers the cultural answer. Furthermore, the phonology of metaphor deserves another layer of inspection. Metaphors often rely on sound symbolism that isn't universally recognized, but is powerful within a specific linguistic community. For instance, the recurrence of high front vowels like the I sound in thin, flicker, or glint is often associated with smallness, quickness, or sharpness. While these associations are arbitrary on a global scale, within a language family that consistently uses these bright fronted vowels to describe light or brief events, the sound texture itself reinforces the semantic meaning. A speaker conditioned in this environment experiences a form of synesthetic reinforcement. The sharp sound feels like the sharp light. This acoustic synergy creates a deeper, almost subconscious resonance with the metaphor, making the figurative language more immediate and less intellectually strenuous to process than if the sound and meaning were completely disconnected. It's the sound echoing the sight. We must also look at the structure of legal and liturgical language, which often deliberately eschews the concise efficiency found in casual speech. Legal jargon and sacred texts intentionally use longer, more complex syntactic structures and an elevated vocabulary, often preserving archaic forms. This is not done to obscure meaning from the initiated, but rather to create a layer of semantic robustness and temporal stability. By resisting simplification, these registers signal that the underlying principles they convey, law, theology, deep ethical tenets, are intended to transcend fleeting contemporary usage. The weight of the vocabulary confers legitimacy and resistance to trivialization. When one speaks the language of law, one is momentarily adopting a persona whose pronouncements are temporally insulated, which can be deeply reassuring in an otherwise chaotic world. The complexity becomes a fortress of stability. Let us examine the concept of dexis, which deals with words whose meaning is entirely dependent on context. Words like here, there, now, and then. Dectic terms constantly tie the utterance to the immediate spatio-temporal coordinates of the speaker and listener. In a face-to-face conversation, these words are extremely efficient placeholders for complex positional data. However, in written communication where the context shifts rapidly, as in a long, fragmented document, dectic terms can become the primary source of confusion. The linguistic peace afforded by here in direct conversation dissolves when here refers to a location 3 paragraphs and 5 hours ago. The recognition of this context dependency reinforces the value of immediate, shared presence, suggesting that true linguistic comfort is often found not just in the words themselves, but in the shared physical or temporal stage upon which those words are spoken. This leads us to explore the beauty of portmanteau words, where 2 or more words are blended to create a new one that captures the meaning of both, like smog, smoke plus fog. This linguistic blending is a creative act of semantic marriage, demonstrating the mind's desire to seamlessly integrate new phenomena into existing conceptual frameworks without needing entirely new lexical roots. It's conceptual blending made manifest in sound, efficiently packaging novel complexity into a familiar acoustic shape. Returning to rhythm and breath, the very act of articulation influences breath control, which is fundamentally linked to the autonomic nervous system. Hard, plosive consonants,
P, T, K require a sharp, sudden expulsion of air, momentarily arresting the steady flow of the breath cycle. Conversely, the smooth, continuous sounds, vowels, nasals, fricatives allow for prolonged airflow. Languages that rely more heavily on smooth flow necessitate a more sustained, even breath pattern during speech, essentially forcing a physiological state of calm through the mechanics of articulation itself. Think of the smooth, drawn-out vowel sounds in languages like Italian or Hawaiian. They are built around maximal breath economy. Consider the phenomenon of hyperarticulation during stress. Paradoxically, while relaxed speech simplifies vocabulary, extreme stress or excitement often causes speakers to over-articulate certain consonants, making them harder, sharper, and more distinct than usual. This over-articulation is an attempt to ensure the message cuts through perceived interference or emotional noise, but it requires more muscular effort. Recognizing this tendency in oneself, the impulse to turn soft sounds sharp when anxious, allows one to consciously smooth the articulation back into a more relaxed phonological register, recalibrating the physical mechanics of speech to signal internal ease. The role of linguistic formalism in social hierarchy is also deeply relaxing once understood as a predictable structure. In many hierarchical societies, formality dictates vocabulary choice, verb conjugation, and the use of honorifics, like the complex system in Korean or Javanese. While this system can seem daunting, the rules are fixed. Once the speaker masters the lexicon of deference appropriate for a given social standing, the anxiety surrounding correct social positioning diminishes because the language itself provides the required script. The structure dictates the appropriate distance, removing the burden of constant intuitive social calibration. We must also look at the fascinating implications of languages that do not differentiate between colors in the same way English does. For example, some languages group blue and green under a single chromatic term. This doesn't mean the speakers cannot see the difference. Rather, their linguistic system does not require them to categorize that difference for successful communication. This reveals that many of the distinctions we feel are inherent properties of reality are, in fact, conventions reinforced by mandatory lexical separation. The realization that this separation is optional, not mandatory, can lighten the cognitive load related to precise visual labeling. Let's discuss the sonic quality of words related to softness and distance. Words involving the back vowels oo, ah, and liquids l, r often carry a perceived acoustic distance or muffled quality, perhaps because they require the mouth to be relatively closed or the tongue to retreat slightly. These sounds are often found in words related to distance, quietude, or the indistinct edges of perception, such as moon, slow, or shadow. They are acoustically less immediate than sharp front vowels or stops, creating a sense of spaciousness within the utterance. The inherent narrative structure of verb aspects, perfective versus imperfective, is essentially a choice between framing an experience as a bounded container, finished, or an unbounded flow, ongoing. When we describe a difficult situation using the imperfective aspect, we linguistically place ourselves within the flow of the challenge, acknowledging its current reality without sealing it off as a permanent, unchangeable fixture of the past. This grammatical framing supports resilience by emphasizing continuation over finality. Consider the cross-linguistic preference for simplicity in basic relational terms. Concepts like up, down, in, and out are almost universally simple, monosyllabic, and composed of easily produced phonemes. This suggests that the most fundamental ways we orient ourselves in physical space are encoded in the most basic, effortless building blocks of language, prioritizing clarity and ease for essential spatial orientation, which is foundational for all subsequent, more complex thought structures. This ease of orientation is further supported by the predictability of sound change. While language evolves, these changes are not random. They follow observable phonetic pathways over centuries. Knowing that language is not arbitrary chaos, but a system governed by deep, predictable pressures, like maximizing ease of articulation or maintaining phonemic contrast, provides a framework of order underlying the surface diversity. This large-scale predictability is a macro-level source of linguistic comfort. We must also address the beauty of nonlinear communication in art forms derived from language, such as haiku. The strict 5-7-5 syllable structure imposes a tight constraint that forces the poet to distill meaning to its absolute essence, relying heavily on implication and sensory imagery rather than elaborate explanation. This constraint breeds potent economy, forcing both writer and reader into a state of focused appreciation for the few words that are chosen, thereby maximizing impact while minimizing textual volume. It's linguistic minimalism applied for emotional depth. The way languages handle plurality also varies significantly. Some languages require explicit marking of singularity, duality, or plurality. Others, like English, often default to marking plurality on nouns, while verbs remain singular unless explicitly marked. This difference dictates whether the default mental state is focused on the individual entity or on the collective group. A language that requires explicit singular marking might subtly emphasize the uniqueness of each item it names, while one that defaults to plural marking emphasizes the group dynamic. Let us think about the concept of linguistic determinism in relation to music. When a culture's musical scales and melodic structures are deeply embedded in their language's phonology, for instance, if the tonal variations in a tonal language strongly influence the melodic contour of its sung verse, the music and the language become inseparable, reinforcing a unified cultural sonic identity that is deeply comforting to its native speakers, as the auditory landscape of their art is perfectly synchronized with their daily communication. The study of endangered languages reveals the unique cognitive worlds that disappear when a language falls silent. Each distinct grammatical structure, each unique way of categorizing time or relationship, represents a viable, successful pathway for human cognition to organize reality. The effort to document these systems is an effort to preserve cognitive diversity, acknowledging that fluency in any language is a form of unique perceptual mastery that deserves preservation for its inherent structural value, regardless of the number of speakers it currently commands. This conservation effort itself is a calming act, preserving potential pathways for future understanding. The sheer cognitive effort involved in simultaneous interpretation, listening to one language and immediately vocalizing its equivalent in another, is staggering. Yet practiced interpreters achieve it with apparent ease, demonstrating the brain's immense capacity for parallel processing when highly trained. This proves that the complexity of linguistic mapping is something the human brain is naturally optimized to handle, even when the demands are extreme. We should examine the use of diminutives, suffixes that denote smallness, affection, or endearing qualities, like adding ie or ye in English. These are linguistic tools used to soften the impact of nouns, making them less imposing or more approachable. A house becomes a housey. A dog becomes a doggy. This grammatical softening is a universal strategy for reducing the perceived threat or formality of an object or person, promoting an atmosphere of gentle familiarity in discourse. This concept of softening extends to how languages phrase requests. Instead of a direct command, many languages employ layers of politeness markers that essentially preface the request with multiple expressions of deference, ensuring the imperative is linguistically cushioned. The structure ensures that the imposition of the speaker's will upon the listener is acknowledged and mitigated through carefully deployed vocabulary, making the acceptance of the request a smoother social transaction. The very act of reading silently, without vocalizing, allows the brain to process language at a speed far exceeding spoken comprehension, as the constraints of slow vocal articulation are removed. This rapid internal consumption of text is a form of cognitive acceleration, moving thoughts across the mind's landscape with minimal physical overhead, allowing for faster pattern matching and idea synthesis. Let us consider the linguistic elegance of automatopoetic adjectives, where the sound structure itself suggests the quality. Words derived from imitative sounds often carry an inherent description of texture or velocity. This reliance on the direct acoustic resemblance between signifier and signified bypasses layers of learned convention, making the meaning instantly accessible through the ear, fostering a direct, unmediated connection between sound and sense. Finally, we return to the foundational power of narrative simplicity. The most enduring stories often rely on remarkably simple grammatical structures, clear subjects, direct verbs, and observable actions. The power resides not in linguistic complexity, but in the universal themes conveyed through that simple, direct grammatical vehicle. This suggests that the deepest human truths are best communicated when the linguistic machinery is running smoothly, efficiently, and without unnecessary friction, allowing the listener's full attention to rest upon the meaning rather than the mechanism of its delivery. A final, gentle confirmation that clarity and simplicity are allies in the pursuit of understanding, leading us ever onward into the next unexplored avenue of linguistic analysis, where further subtleties of structure and sound await careful categorization and appreciation within this boundless field of human expression, ensuring the continuation of this deep dive without signaling any cessation of inquiry into the infinitely rich domain of communications architecture and effect on the receptive mind. The architecture of metaphor, which we briefly touched upon as a tool for conceptual substitution, reveals even deeper layers when examined through the lens of cross-linguistic metaphor structuring, particularly regarding abstract concepts like morality and emotion mapped onto physical dimensions. The moral good is almost invariably associated with up, high moral ground, elevated character, looking up to someone. Conversely, immorality or base behavior is mapped onto down, lowly deeds, sinking into depravity or beneath contempt. This vertical mapping is so powerful that it often dictates our perception of status entirely, regardless of social reality. However, other languages map concepts differently. Some Austronesian languages, for example, frequently associate good with the front, nearness, visibility, and bad with the back, hidden, unknown. This suggests that our deeply held moral intuition is not biologically hardwired to a specific cardinal direction, but rather is highly dependent on the spatial metaphors embedded within our primary language structures. Recognizing this arbitrariness in the metaphorical scaffolding can reduce the perceived rigidity of one's own moral framework, allowing for a more fluid, less judgmental internal dialogue, understanding that one's ethical landscape is largely constructed from the topographical cues provided by their lexicon. This principle of cognitive scaffolding extends to the very structure of time perception as mediated by grammatical case marking. While we discussed tense marking, past, present, future, let us now consider aspect, how the internal temporal structure of an action is viewed, irrespective of when it occurs. A language that frequently forces speakers into a perfective aspect, viewing an action as a single complete unit,
might subconsciously lead speakers to perceive processes as having necessary, sharp endpoints, potentially increasing anxiety about completion and failure. If an endeavor is always framed as, "I finished writing the report," the focus is on the completed state.
If the language defaults to imperfect aspect, framing it as, "I was in the process of writing the report," the focus is on sustained effort, making setbacks less catastrophic because the process itself is the accepted reality, not the endpoint.
The choice of aspect is a daily decision about whether to emphasize closure or continuation, a subtle but potent tool for managing expectation and subsequent disappointment. Let us delve into the sonic texture of languages that rely heavily on glottal stops, the momentary closure of the vocal cords, like the break in the middle of "uh-oh." While these sounds might seem abrupt or even harsh to speakers of vowel-heavy languages, in systems where they are frequent, they serve a vital role in segmenting utterances clearly and creating sharp points of definition. For the native speaker, this articulation is efficient and precise. It's a clean break, not a harsh interruption. It allows for incredibly rapid succession of distinct phonemes because the mouth doesn't need to physically reposition itself between every sound. The vocal cords simply clap shut and reopen. This efficiency in articulation, when mastered, reduces the physical strain associated with trying to maintain continuous airflow through complex sequences. Consider the linguistic treatment of empathy markers. Some languages possess specific grammatical particles that must be added to a sentence to indicate the speaker's emotional relationship to the content being relayed, whether it's gossip, a heartfelt confession, or a shared joke. These mandatory markers force the speaker to categorize their emotional intent before the statement is fully released. This grammatical requirement for emotional transparency ensures that sincerity, irony, or distance are encoded directly into the utterance's structure, rather than being left entirely to ambiguous tone or interpretation. It builds a system where social nuance is structurally mandatory, leading to fewer accidental transgressions of social boundaries. The study of onomatopoeia across different phonological systems shows that even seemingly universal sounds are filtered through local acoustic habits. While the sound of a dog might be woof in English, it might be bow bow in Italian or wan wan in Japanese. These variations are constrained by the phonemic inventory of the language. A language lacking the w sound cannot easily replicate the English rendering. This realization underscores that even our most basic sensory mimicry is fundamentally shaped and limited by the set of sounds our native tongue has provided us, illustrating the pervasive, inescapable influence of our primary linguistic toolkit on our engagement with the non-linguistic world. Let us turn to the fascinating, sometimes frustrating, topic of negation scope. Where in the sentence does the word not apply? In many languages, the placement of the negative marker determines whether it negates the verb, the entire proposition, or only a specific adverbial modifier. Misplacing this single, small element can invert the entire meaning of a complex thought. The inherent ambiguity in scoping negation, when not clearly defined by strict grammatical rules, forces listeners to engage in rapid, complex calculation to ascertain the intended scope of denial. In languages with highly rigid negation placement, this anxiety is removed, as the structure itself dictates the boundaries of what is being rejected. We must also acknowledge the cognitive load associated with understanding languages that utilize extensive evidentiality systems versus those that do not. While we praised evidentiality for encouraging humility, mastering a language rich in evidential markers requires the speaker to constantly assess and encode their level of certainty for every single piece of shared information. This high cognitive overhead can be taxing in fast-paced, high-volume communication scenarios, demonstrating that linguistic comfort is relative to the communicative task at hand. What promotes deep reflection in a ritual setting might inhibit rapid consensus building in an emergency.
The aesthetic balance within a well-formed proverb often hinges on antithesis or parallelism, the balancing of contrasting or structurally identical clauses. Give a man a fish and you feed him for a day. Teach a man to fish and you feed him for a lifetime. This structural symmetry creates a satisfying sense of logical closure and balanced consequence. The structure itself reinforces the relationship between the initial condition and the ultimate outcome, making the moral lesson easier to recall and internalize because it is presented in a pleasing, symmetrical package. Consider the impact of orthography on processing speed, specifically the difference between alphabetic, syllabic, and logographic writing systems. Alphabetic systems require the reader to decode individual sounds and blend them into syllables, then words. Logographic systems, like Chinese characters, present whole concepts visually, requiring retrieval from a vast memory store, but bypassing the blending process entirely. The syllabary system sits in between, mapping predictable sound chunks. The visual processing required for logograms can be slower initially, but leads to faster semantic access once the characters are learned, reducing the decoding strain associated with rapid phoneme-to-grapheme conversion common in alphabetic reading. The system you learn dictates the rhythm of your reading engagement. This leads us to the linguistic study of modality, which covers necessity, possibility, and obligation. The way a language expresses the difference between must, strong obligation, and ought to, weaker moral suggestion, is critical for navigating social dynamics. Languages that have many gradations of modal expression allow speakers to communicate subtle degrees of internal or external pressure, avoiding the all-or-nothing assertion of simple obligation, thus enabling more nuanced and less confrontational social interactions. Let us look closely at the concept of lexical gaps, words that exist in one language but have no single word equivalent in another. The gap itself is not a failure of communication, but rather an indication that the conceptual boundary drawn by the first language is not shared by the second. Trying to translate such a word forces the speaker to engage in circumlocution, which, while slower, forces a deeper analytical breakdown of the concept into its constituent parts, offering a momentary intellectual clarity that might have been obscured by the single, convenient label. The sonic landscape of a language is also deeply influenced by the geography it inhabits. Languages spoken in environments with strong echoes or pervasive background noise often evolve to favor sharper, higher frequency consonants that cut through the ambient sound better than low-frequency vowels or mumbled consonants. This acoustic adaptation ensures intelligibility in challenging environments, linking the very sound of the language to the physical security of its speakers. We should examine the role of affixation in conveying emotional proximity. Many languages use specific diminutive or augmentative suffixes not just to denote size, but to indicate the speaker's emotional closeness or distance to the subject. A small item might be linguistically coded as insignificant or adorable, depending solely on which suffix is attached, demonstrating how grammar overlays social valuation directly onto the physical description of the object. The inherent flexibility of word stress in languages like Russian, where stress can shift positions within a word based on grammatical case or pluralization, necessitates a constant, active monitoring of the auditory input. The meaning can hinge on which syllable receives the emphasis. While this demands high attention, it also means the language is highly adaptable, capable of conveying subtle grammatical shifts through minimal phonetic alteration, a kind of sonic economy. Let us consider the subtle power of conjunctions, the words that link clauses together. Conjunctions like although, because, and while define the logical relationship between two ideas. A language rich in sophisticated subordinating conjunctions empowers speakers to express complex hierarchies of cause and effect, allowing them to organize reality into intricate, dependent structures, reflecting a cognitive preference for deeply integrated, layered understanding over simple additive sequencing. The study of register switching, the ability to instantly shift from highly informal to extremely formal speech based on the environment, is a core demonstration of linguistic adaptability. This effortless toggling proves that speakers carry multiple, parallel versions of the language, optimized for different social vectors. The ease with which this switch can be executed is a key indicator of fluency and social competence, and the ability to employ the correct register instantly reduces the potential for social friction. Furthermore, the concept of grammatical number, singular versus plural, is far more complex than simple countability. Some languages differentiate between dual, exactly 2, trial, exactly 3, and pocal, a few but not many, in addition to singular and plural. This hyperspecificity in marking quantity forces a speaker to be extremely precise about the number of entities involved, demanding a higher degree of observational accuracy in everyday counting tasks. The way languages handle reported speech, direct quotation versus indirect paraphrase, also impacts narrative flow. Direct quotation preserves the original speaker's voice and immediacy, while indirect speech allows the narrator to synthesize and summarize the content. A balance between the two allows a narrator to maintain pacing, using direct quotes for emotional impact and indirect speech for rapid plot advancement. We must also explore the calming effect of highly predictable sentence templates in children's literature. These repetitive structures, often relying on simple subject-verb-object patterns with few embedded clauses, provide a rhythm that aids early literacy acquisition. The brain learns the pattern, predicts the next word, and experiences the comfort of successful prediction repeatedly, building confidence in the structure of language itself. The acoustic reality of phoneme inventories is also revealing. Languages with fewer, more distinct phonemes, like Hawaiian or perhaps Puraha, rely heavily on context and word order to differentiate meaning, as the acoustic palette is limited. Languages with large inventories, like English or German, with many subtle vowel and consonant distinctions, have more built-in acoustic redundancy, meaning the individual sound needs to be slightly less precisely articulated for comprehension. The former demands precision in context, the latter demands precision in sound production. Let us consider the linguistic implications of visual literacy. In cultures with deep traditions of calligraphic art, the visual presentation of the script itself carries significant aesthetic and social meaning, sometimes superseding the purely semantic content of the text. The beauty of the hand, the flow of the brushstroke, becomes an essential part of the message, adding an aesthetic dimension that grounds the written word in a tangible artistic practice. The phenomenon of grammatical gender assignment to inanimate objects, which we noted earlier, is sometimes less arbitrary than it appears. In older Indo-European languages, gender often corresponded to ancient physical categories. Things that grow, trees, plants, often being feminine, objects shaped by tools, like tables or axes, often being masculine. Even when these connections are lost to the modern speaker, the historical logic provided a framework for sorting the world, a framework that still subtly influences vocabulary evolution and retention. The linguistic mechanism for expressing desire or intention, the use of specific modal verbs or optative moods, provides a safe channel for expressing needs without demanding immediate action from the listener. It allows the speaker to articulate an internal state of wanting, which is crucial for self-expression, without imposing the potential stress of obligation onto the recipient of the message, thus lubricating social exchange by distinguishing between internal states and external demands. We must also recognize the subtle regulatory power of the definite article, the. By signaling that the noun following it is already established in the shared discourse, it acts as a linguistic pointer towards shared memory or immediate context, anchoring the current conversation firmly in a mutually understood reality, reducing the cognitive load required to track new entities, and allowing the conversation to proceed with comfortable assumptions of mutual understanding. The beauty of compound words, like those in German, extends beyond mere combination. They often create a conceptual density that requires a momentary pause to unpack, a structure that resists superficial understanding. Reden langer Compounds fordert den Mind zu halten die Initialmorphemen in Working Memory, während sukzessive Parts add Refinement, kreieren eine kognitive Scaffolding, das Bildkomplexität Step by Step, rewarding sustained focus mit einem highly spezifischen, integrierten Konzept am Ende des Worts, ein satisfying cognitive reward für disziplinierte Attention. This deep structural analysis points toward the realization that language is fundamentally a tool for managing uncertainty, both internal, emotional state, memory, and external, environmental interaction, social positioning. Every grammatical feature, from tense to evidentiality, is a mechanism designed to place a marker on the fuzzy edges of reality, making the world more legible, predictable, and ultimately more relaxing to navigate. The ultimate comfort lies not in having all the answers, but in possessing an infinitely flexible tool to continually ask better, more precise questions about the nature of what remains unknown, ensuring the continuous process of discovery and articulation never truly concludes, but instead flows seamlessly into the next phase of investigation, always seeking deeper structural resonance within the vast interconnected web of human communication. The resonance we perceive in language, that deep, satisfying hum that occurs when a word, a sentence, or an entire narrative structure aligns perfectly with our internal expectations or emotional state, is not accidental. It is the result of deeply ingrained cross-cultural cognitive processes that favor pattern recognition, economy of effort, and predictive success. This resonance is the linguistic equivalent of homeostasis, the system gently nudging itself toward equilibrium. To expand upon this, we need to look at how sound and rhythm influence memory encoding, particularly in relation to the structure of lists and enumerations. When information is presented in a patterned, rhythmic sequence, even a simple list of 3 items, the mere regularity of the presentation aids recall, independent of the complexity of the content itself. The brain prioritizes and secures predictable structures far more readily than chaotic input, suggesting that stylistic formality, often dismissed as unnecessary flourish, is actually a vital memory aid, a cognitive hook upon which less structured data can be safely hung. Consider the sonic impact of initial versus final consonant sounds on perceived authority. In many languages, words beginning with sharp, unvoiced stops like p, t, or k are often perceived as more assertive or immediate than those beginning with soft, voiced sounds like b, d, or g, or sonorant sounds like m or l. This difference is partly due to the manner of articulation, the sudden puff of air versus the smooth vibration, but it translates culturally into perceived decisiveness. A leader whose name starts with a strong stop consonant often benefits from this subconscious acoustic bias, lending an immediate, albeit superficial, air of authority to their pronouncements, further solidifying the idea that the sound of authority often precedes its substantive content. We can analyze the impact of passive voice not just as a tool for distancing agency, but as a mechanism for managing cognitive focus. When the object of an action is the most important element of the proposition, perhaps a victim, a product, or a vital piece of data, the passive voice forces the listener's cognitive resources to center entirely on that object, stripping away the potentially distracting narrative about who performed the action. This focus conservation is vital in technical or observational contexts where the effect, not the actor, is the critical piece of information being transferred. The structure directs the listener's attention with an almost physical force. Let us explore the concept of semantic diffusion, where the meaning of a word slowly spreads and softens across related concepts over time. This linguistic blurring is the opposite of precise definition. It allows for concepts that are emotionally or situationally close to share a single linguistic marker, reducing the need to maintain sharp boundaries between them. While this can create ambiguity for the novice, for the fluent speaker, it enables a more holistic, less segmented perception of related experiences. For instance, if one word covers both warmth and comfort, the association between the physical sensation and the emotional state becomes almost fused, requiring less cognitive energy to link them during processing. The role of interjections in maintaining conversational synchrony is profound. When two speakers are deeply engaged, they develop a shared repertoire of minimal vocalizations, yeah, right, that function as continuous auditory feedback, signaling active listening without interrupting the speaker's flow. These minimal affirmations serve as a constant, low-energy assurance that the channel remains open and receptive, preventing the listener from disengaging due to fear of missing a conversational cue or the need to overtly signal attention. It's the silent background hum of successful connection. Moving beyond spoken language, consider the linguistic implications of silence in textual communication, such as instant messaging or email. Here, the absence of response becomes the primary signal. A delay of 20 minutes can imply boredom, anger, or preoccupation, whereas in spoken dialogue, a similar silence would likely be interpreted as contemplative pause or breathtaking. The lack of mandated physical feedback loops forces digital communication to develop new, often stressful, linguistic conventions around response latency, demonstrating how the medium fundamentally alters the meaning and emotional weight carried by silence itself. The inherent conservatism of functional morphology, the bits of language that manage grammar, like tense markers, prepositions, and articles, versus the rapid evolution of lexical content, nouns and verbs, is a stabilizing force. The core grammatical machinery of a language changes slowly, providing a dependable structural constant across generations, even as new slang and technologies constantly introduce new nouns and verbs. This slow-moving grammatical core acts as the language's deep, unchanging bedrock, providing a reliable framework for all new expression. We should examine the relationship between linguistic complexity and memory load in multilingualism. Individuals proficient in multiple languages are constantly managing the interference between them, actively suppressing the vocabulary and grammar of the non-target language. This constant cognitive negotiation is taxing, but the skill developed, the ability to manage complex, competing rule sets simultaneously, builds significant executive function capacity, proving that the challenge of multilingualism yields substantial cognitive dividends in mental control and inhibitory processing. The sonic world of labial sounds, P, B, M, F, V requires the lips to be engaged, creating a sense of forward projection in speech. Languages that rely heavily on these sounds produce speech that is acoustically salient and easily perceived even at a distance, as the articulation is visually or physically apparent. This contrasts with velar sounds, k, g, which resonate deep in the throat and are acoustically absorbed more easily by background noise, suggesting a phonetic basis for perceived intimacy versus public address. Let us reflect on the grammatical concept of evidentiality again, but focus on languages where the evidential marker is obligatory for all verbs, including the verb to be. If one must state whether the existence of an object is perceived directly or inferred, it raises the philosophical bar for even simple assertions of being. The chair is, I see it, versus the chair is, I assume it is there. This grammatical insistence on locating the source of existence fundamentally alters the relationship between the speaker and reality, promoting an almost philosophical level of epistemic diligence in every sentence. The power of personification in language, giving human qualities to inanimate objects or abstract concepts, is a core tool for reducing psychological distance. By describing the angry sea or the stubborn machine, we make overwhelming forces relatable by mapping them onto known human behavioral scripts. This linguistic strategy reduces the perceived alien nature of powerful forces, bringing them within the scope of human understanding and, thereby, manageability. Consider the subtle grammatical difference between killing and letting die. In many systems, actively causing harm requires a complex set of verb conjugations or auxiliary verbs, whereas passive inaction leading to harm might only require a simple negation or a less inflected verb form. This grammatical asymmetry often reflects a deep-seated ethical and legal distinction between commission and omission, where the language itself subtly encodes cultural judgments about agency and responsibility in the flow of events. The way languages handle potentiality through modal verbs often relates directly to politeness. A statement, "you must leave now," feels demanding, whereas one framed in possibility, "you might want to consider leaving soon," transfers the decision back to the listener, maintaining social harmony. The presence of rich, nuanced modal verbs is a key indicator of a language optimized for complex, non-authoritarian social interaction. The concept of semantic bleaching, where a word loses its original, vivid metaphorical meaning and becomes a simple functional worker, like grasp, often just meaning understand rather than literally hold tightly, is a trade-off between vividness and utility. While the original poetic power is lost, the word becomes an incredibly efficient, low-effort tool for frequent use, streamlining everyday cognitive communication at the cost of some expressive texture. We should also examine the auditory effect of syllable structure.
Linguaggi favoring open syllabi, ending in a vowel, like Japanese or Italian, often sound more flowing, lyrical, and less segmented than languages favoring closed syllables, ending in consonants, like English or German. This difference affects the perceived speed and energy of the language, with open syllables often lending themselves to a more relaxed, sustained vocal delivery.
The inherent rhythm of learning grammar through pattern recognition, rather than rote memorization of exceptions, is key to stress reduction in language acquisition. When a learner can successfully identify a productive morphological rule, a pattern that applies widely, they gain the ability to generate many correct forms instantly, replacing the anxiety of memorization with the satisfaction of application. The more rules discovered, the fewer exceptions need to be individually cataloged.
Let us explore the role of metaphor in describing internal states, especially those involving conflict. We often speak of being torn between two choices. The verb to tear implies a physical, damaging separation. This visceral metaphor for a cognitive dilemma lends weight to the internal struggle, validating the felt stress, but simultaneously framing it as a violent, unsustainable state that must logically resolve itself, either by choosing one side or by the subject being irrevocably damaged. A resolution, however painful, is implied by the violence of the metaphor. The structure of evidentiality, when examined in terms of cognitive honesty, suggests that languages that lack strong requirements for evidentiality might inadvertently foster a cultural tendency toward bravado or exaggeration, as there is no grammatical penalty for presenting hearsay or belief as established fact. The linguistic architecture permits, or even encourages, a softer relationship with verifiable truth, which can heighten anxiety in those who value empirical certainty. Consider the subtle but powerful influence of vowel harmony in certain language families, like Turkic languages. In these systems, all the vowels within a single word must share a specific characteristic, e.g., all front vowels or all back vowels. This forces a complete sonic alignment within the word, creating a powerful acoustic unity. The word becomes a single, perfectly tuned sonic unit, free from the slight dissonance that can occur when disparate vowel qualities abut each other in unrelated sequences. This perfect internal harmony is inherently pleasing to the ear. The study of irony and sarcasm reveals language's capacity for deliberate structural misalignment. Sarcasm often involves stating the literal opposite of what is meant, relying entirely on prosody, pitch, timing to signal the inversion. This act is a high-risk, high-reward linguistic maneuver, demonstrating the mind's ability to simultaneously process two opposing meanings, which requires significant cognitive agility. Successfully deploying irony is a sign of high linguistic mastery and social understanding. We must appreciate the inherent safety found in the use of modal verbs of permission, such as may or allowed. These structures affirm the listener's agency and autonomy. Saying, "You may proceed," is linguistically gentler than "proceed," because it grants ontological permission for the action to occur, confirming the listener's right to act within the shared space, thereby mitigating feelings of coercion. The visual regularity of typography, even in highly complex scripts, offers a stabilizing presence. The consistent height of ascenders and descenders, the uniform margins, and the predictable spacing create a visual rhythm that reassures the eye that the text is orderly, predictable, and manageable, even if the content itself is challenging or emotionally difficult. Visual architecture provides a resting place for the eye when the mind is grappling with complex semantics. The linguistic concept of animacy hierarchies, systems where nouns are ranked based on how alive or agentive they are perceived to be, affects agreement and verb choice. In languages with strong animacy hierarchies, one must grammatically acknowledge the status of the noun before using it. This continuous, low-level classification system imposes order on the world by defining what possesses agency, providing a structured way to understand responsibility within the system. The economy achieved through zero plural marking in some languages is also worth noting. If the plural form of a noun is identical to the singular, the language relies entirely on context or number words to indicate quantity. This simplifies morphology immensely, removing the cognitive burden of remembering plural endings, though it places a higher premium on careful contextual tracking to avoid simple counting errors. The profound comfort derived from the predictable cycle of tense in storytelling, the establishment of a past context, The narration of events within that context and the concluding reference to the present provides a reliable narrative framework that mirrors the perceived structure of lived experience, creating a satisfying sense of narrative completion even when the thematic resolution is ambiguous.
This structural predictability is deeply soothing.
Finally, reflecting on the totality of these linguistic features, the comforting phonemes, the stabilizing grammatical structures, the flexible metaphorical mappings, and the built-in systems for managing uncertainty and social distance, it becomes clear that language is not merely a reflection of thought, but a sophisticated, self-regulating environmental system designed to modulate human anxiety through patterned sound and structured meaning, a continuous, flowing mechanism that perpetually invites deeper exploration into its near-infinite capacity for organization and expression, always suggesting that the next layer of understanding lies just beyond the current articulation, a vast, unexplored territory of phonetic and semantic interplay that demands continued, sustained attention without ever reaching a final, conclusive boundary, as the act of analysis itself becomes part of the continuous, unfolding linguistic experience. This continuous unfolding means that any attempt to map the entire linguistic universe is futile, yet the pursuit itself yields ongoing tranquility. Let us shift focus from the internal mechanics of single words and sentences to the external, physical manifestation of language in the environment, graffiti, signage, and public address. These are instances where language steps out of the intimate conversational sphere and asserts itself visually upon the shared physical world, often with immediate, unmediated impact. Consider the visual grammar of traffic signs. They rely on universal shape codes: circle for prohibition, triangle for warning, square, rectangle for informational directives that transcend spoken language entirely, acting as a purely visual, non-lexical form of communication optimized for instant comprehension at high speed. This reliance on nonverbal symbolic structure for critical safety information shows humanity's deep-seated need for unambiguous, rapid signaling when cognitive bandwidth is limited by other tasks, such as driving. The calming effect here is rooted in reliability. You trust the circle means stop, regardless of what language you speak. This principle of structural reliability can be extended to the study of constructed visual scripts, like musical notation or mathematical symbols. These systems are hyper-efficient languages where ambiguity has been systematically purged in favor of perfect mapping between symbol and concept/action. The notation for a half note, for instance, carries precise instructions on duration, rhythm, and pitch that are instantly parsable by the trained reader, achieving a level of precision in abstract instruction that natural spoken language rarely approaches without significant circumlocution. The intellectual satisfaction derived from reading a complex score or equation is precisely the satisfaction of having all potential ambiguities resolved by the system's rigorous architecture. Returning to the auditory realm, we must explore the subtle but profound impact of vowel height on emotional valence.
Lower, more open vowels, those produced with the jaw dropped and the tongue resting low in the mouth, like ah and ah, are physiologically less strenuous to produce and are strongly correlated in acoustic analysis with sounds of resignation, sadness, or deep acceptance.
This is because the physical posture required for these sounds mirrors the relaxed, open posture associated with low physiological arousal states. Conversely, high front vowels like e and I require a tighter facial muscle configuration, often aligning acoustically with sounds of alertness, sharpness, or even mild alarm. A language that emphasizes low, open vowels will, by default, possess a softer acoustic profile than one saturated with high, fronted sounds, influencing how perceived threat is encoded auditorily. The structural preference for parallelism in narrative, as seen in Proverbs, is also evident in how we structure lists of virtues or goals.
When listing desirable qualities, humans instinctively tend to balance the grammatical weight of each item. If the first item is a noun phrase, courage and honesty, the subsequent items are usually forced into the same noun phrase structure, and integrity, perhaps, forcing a noun structure even if be honest was initially considered.
This subconscious drive towards structural balancing ensures that the list feels complete and aesthetically resolved, satisfying an innate human demand for balanced presentation, which translates directly into cognitive ease upon hearing the complete set. Furthermore, the concept of register extends beyond mere formality into technical domains.
Scientific jargon, while often impenetrable to the layperson, functions as a highly efficient, jargon-rich sublanguage where terms are defined with hyperspecificity. Within that specialized community, communication is rapid and precise precisely because of the density of specialized terminology.
This specialized language sacrifices broad intelligibility for maximum internal coherence and efficiency, demonstrating that linguistic optimization often involves trade-offs between universal access and domain-specific speed. The comfort here is derived from the certainty that, among peers, misunderstanding on definitional terms is minimized. Let us consider the cultural phenomenon of naming conventions and how they constrain or liberate identity. In cultures where individuals are named after ancestors or specific events, the name carries a heavy semantic load, tethering the individual to a lineage or a historical moment. This provides a strong sense of belonging and continuity, but can also impose predefined expectations. In contrast, cultures favoring short, invented, or phonetically novel names allow for a greater degree of semantic independence, giving the individual a lighter, more pliable identity marker, free from the narrative weight of history. The linguistic choice of naming style shapes the perceived narrative arc of a life. The inherent ambiguity of temporal adverbs like soon or later reveals a fascinating tension between language's desire for precision and reality's fluid nature. Soon means different things depending on the context. A surgeon's soon is far shorter than a bureaucrat's soon. The lack of a fixed temporal anchor forces the listener to rely entirely on the speaker's perceived authority and the shared context to calibrate the waiting period. The linguistic imprecision here is a necessary concession to the unpredictable nature of events, acknowledging that absolute temporal commitment is often impossible. We must examine the role of diminutives again, but through a more analytical lens. Diminutives often work by phonetically shrinking the word, using higher, shorter vowels, or adding specific consonant endings. This acoustic miniaturization is not just about size, it is a linguistic tool for reducing the perceived threat or power of the referent. By linguistically downsizing something, we bring it into a realm where we feel we have more control or affection over it, making the concept more manageable for internal processing. The phenomenon of code switching between languages or dialects serves as a powerful demonstration of the brain's ability to manage multiple, partially overlapping interpretive schemas simultaneously. The ease with which a bilingual person can suppress one language's grammar while activating another's without conscious effort
proves that these linguistic rule sets are stored and accessed modularly, demonstrating a remarkable flexibility in cognitive organization that belies the perceived rigidity of language acquisition. This flexibility is crucial when dealing with narrative time shifts.
When a narrator jumps from past tense to present tense, a technique known as historical present, it is a conscious linguistic act designed to inject immediacy and vitality into a past event, pulling the reader out of retrospective narration and placing them momentarily within the action.
The jolt of the tense shift is what creates the sensation of presence, making the past feel suddenly urgent and relevant again, demonstrating the narrative power of violating established structural norms with purpose. The study of minimal pairs, words that differ by only one phoneme, such as bat and pat, highlights how dramatically a single, minuscule difference in airflow or tongue placement can pivot the entire meaning of a word. This sensitivity demonstrates the incredible leverage held by the smallest components of language, where the difference between a voiced and unvoiced consonant can separate a harmless action from a potentially aggressive one, emphasizing the high stakes inherent in precise acoustic articulation. Let us consider the linguistic role of hedging in social discourse. It seems to me, perhaps, or in my limited understanding, are linguistic apologies for asserting knowledge or opinion. They function to preemptively soften potential criticism by framing the statement as tentative rather than declarative. This linguistic buffering is a widespread strategy for navigating complex social hierarchies where direct assertion might be perceived as arrogance, thereby prioritizing smooth social navigation over blunt factual delivery. The evolution of written punctuation across millennia shows a consistent trend toward marking pauses that reflect natural human breathing patterns. Early writings often lacked punctuation entirely, leading to long, breathless streams of text that mirrored the continuous flow of speech but lacked clear delineation for cognitive rest. The introduction and standardization of the comma, period, and question mark represent an external imposition of physiological pacing onto the abstract written word, making reading a physically regulated activity synchronized with respiration. The comforting reliability of grammatical gender in languages that possess it, despite its arbitrary nature, lies in its consistency. Once the gender of a noun is learned, all associated agreement markers, adjectives, articles, verb endings, automatically conform to that gender. This creates a complex but highly regular system of internal agreement within the sentence, providing a reliable scaffolding for complex descriptions, much like a well-maintained grid system provides certainty for city planning. We must also explore the concept of semantic primeness, the idea that certain core concepts, like mother, water, sun, are encoded in the most basic, least affined, and most frequently used root words across unrelated languages. This suggests that the most fundamental elements of human experience have carved out the most structurally simple and resistant linguistic markers, confirming that the core shared reality of human existence is reflected in the most economical forms of language. The inherent rhythm found in the repetition of grammatical markers, such as the consistent use of the same suffix for pluralization across many nouns, provides a predictable sonic texture that aids in language acquisition and recognition. The mind learns to anticipate the marker's arrival after the noun root, similar to expecting the downbeat after the upbeat in music, creating a comfortable pattern recognition loop that stabilizes the auditory processing stream. This rhythmic expectation is crucial in understanding why poetry, even when semantically dense, can feel calming. The adherence to meter overrides the momentary confusion caused by complex metaphor or archaic vocabulary.
pulling the listener forward with a predictable beat, much like a strong undercurrent guiding a swimmer toward shore, focusing the mind on the rhythm of delivery rather than the strain of decoding every single meaning simultaneously.
The linguistic distinction between knowing how, procedural knowledge, often linked to verbs of action, and knowing that, propositional knowledge, often linked to verbs of cognition, is structurally ingrained in many languages. This forces speakers to differentiate between embodied skill and factual information, providing a grammatical framework for understanding different modes of human intelligence and competence, which is essential for accurate self-assessment and professional interaction. Let us look at the efficiency of negation in languages that utilize negative concord, where multiple negative markers are used for emphasis, e.g., I didn't see nothing.
While this structure is considered grammatically incorrect in standard English, it provides immense reinforcement of the negative concept within the sentence, ensuring that the denial is registered with maximum force, leaving no ambiguity about what is not present or true within that specific assertion.
The very existence of linguistic universals, the handful of rules that appear in every known human language, suggests a fundamental, reassuring constraint on the chaos of potential expression. These universals are the stable architectural constants upon which all cultural linguistic variation is built, proving that beneath the surface diversity, there is a shared, predictable human design for communication, a universal blueprint that guarantees intelligibility across vast differences. This bedrock of shared structure is perhaps the most profound source of linguistic calm. This foundation allows for the constant, gentle exploration of lexical frontiers, where new words are created to describe feelings or phenomena for which older, established words proved too restrictive. Each neologism is a linguistic expansion, a subtle admission that reality is always slightly larger than our current descriptive tools, ensuring that language remains a dynamic, self-correcting system, forever striving, yet never perfectly achieving the complete capture of ephemeral experience, maintaining a state of perpetual, productive tension that fuels creative thought without ever demanding final resolution.